Welcome everyone to I almost said my show here.
Yeah.
The voice of San Joaquin, right here off the Miracle Mile. It is now time for Connections, Peace, and Justice Radio.
And good evening. This evening, I'm starting on my own for the first time. This is Bruce Giudici, Peace and Justice Connections editor. And this evening, I'm going to be joined by Christie Kelley a little bit later. We just had our first meeting of the Earth Day Committee for the 2020 Earth Day. It's going to be an exciting and interesting Earth Day because it is going to be an election year. And it is going to be following a time when a lot of people seem to be focused on climate change. And so, especially after the last couple weeks, I know that this week, this is September 30th, so we got our meeting started in the month of September. But a lot of people right now are focused on the latest diversion, which is the impeachment process. And that is something that is important to keep to pay attention to. But we really do need to focus and keep our attention on things that are really important, that are going to be long lasting, long after this administration is done and gone. So this evening we're going to be talking about climate change, and we'll be talking about Earth Day, and then just sort of also going through the paper. Connections. It just came off the press today, so we can walk through it, and Christy likes to do that with us. So when she joins us, we can start going there. But wanted to talk first about Earth Day. The Earth Day Festival, the 32nd Annual Earth Day Festival, we'll be having again in Victory Park from 10 to 4, and it's going to be April 26th. That's April, so that's next spring. Is coming up spring, but it is going to be in Victory Park as we have had it in the past. And one exciting thing that we're really working on is trying to get at least 20 classrooms out on site. And so we are really working with Christina down at Durham Ferry. The Durham Ferry Outreach Center for Environmental Studies, and she has a curriculum out there that gets people gets classrooms to come out and interact with the environment. And we're hoping that a lot of the teachers who are out there would be interested in coming to Earth Day and presenting their vision on what they think we can be doing about climate change, because that's going to be our theme this year. We're going to be talking about, we still don't have a saying yet, or a theme. Well, our theme is going to be climate change. And so because just in the past couple of weeks, it seems that everybody was talking about climate change, that the United Nations had a group that had some findings, a science advisory group that said that there's that since the Earth is coming off the 5 warmest years on record, the rise in temperatures is expected to contribute to melting ice in the Arctic and Antarctic, and with corresponding rising seas worldwide. We have tropical cyclones, fires, heat waves, and food insecurity on the horizon. There's a growing recognition that climate impacts are hitting harder and sooner than climate assessments indicated even a decade ago. So a lot of the dire warnings of climate change that scientists have been predicting for decades now are starting to come true. And if they're not just coming true, they're accelerating, because we do have the situation where permafrost that is melting in Russia and in Alaska and northern Canada, that permafrost melting releases methane gas, which is a major greenhouse gas that is making climate change even worse. And as that happens, the sea ice, both Arctic and Antarctic, are melting, exposing the darker sea to sunlight, and that means that more energy is being absorbed, and less is being reflected off into space. And so we end up having even more global warming. So regrettably, we are still moving just at breakneck speed, still burning as much fossil fuels as we possibly can. We have an administration that has in our connections pieces here is on page 13 talking about actually suing, going after the state's air protections, and Trump administration is now suing or stopping the trying to stop California from having more strict air pollution standards than the federal standard. And their argument is very thin on the saying, well, we have to have a federal standard, so it should be as weak as possible, or we should try to have as low a standard as possible, so we can have cheaper cars, or we can have more emissions, or but generally it is going to be mean more emissions. And I mean, it's the same sort of idea that, you know, if California wants to have a minimum wage of $13 or $14 or $15 an hour, well, you know, the federal standard of $7.25 an hour should be the thing that that stands up, because that's what everybody is used to in the rest of the country. And so, in the same way that California wants to set standards that are a little bit higher than the rest of the country, we want to have minimum wages that are higher than the rest of the country, because we want people to be able to have a working wage. We need to have air pollution quality standards that are at least as good as we can possibly do. And you know what the president would like to see us go back to, I guess, the good old days when when gas was 30 cents a gallon and we could all drive our huge tank cars that got maybe 10 or 12 miles per gallon, because that's what made America great. But unfortunately, this is a different world. It's a different situation, and we do have a need to have more strict emission requirements. So Christie is here now, and so we can talk about Earth Day. I was talking a little bit about the emissions requirements and how the federal government would like to restrict those, but it all ties into what we're trying to do, is trying to educate folks on climate change and get people to take action. So again, we were talking about having our event on April 26th, Sunday, from 10 to 4. I know it's a long ways off, but if you're planning to have a booth, or if you are an environmental organization, please set that date aside. It's also noted in the front page of your connections. And
also, if you're a teacher and you're interested in doing climate change focus with your classroom, we have grants available.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, and we were talking about up to 20.
Hopefully 20.
Hopefully 20 if we can, 20 classrooms, and with the focus on climate change. And so if you're just starting to develop your plan for the year, April 29th is a long ways off. I'm sure you already have your plan in place, but maybe not necessarily for the end of April. And don't forget also that sometimes you might want to have something for students to take part in late in the semester or late in the year, when they are maybe needing some extra credit. And Earth Day is a great way to come on out and do that.
Yep.
So we started with, in our meeting this evening over at Christie's place. Our next meeting is going to be November 4th here at the center. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But we started going through what happened last year, where we had 80 booths, 4 food vendors, an entertainment that was, the stage was packed with local folks, and we had a March for Science at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so that was our event for last year, and the focus was on transportation.
Hike, bike? No, wait. Walk, bike, or take a hike.
That's right. And so this year we're trying to come up with a snappy little slogan, but we do know that we're going to be talking about climate change, because that is what that just is the issue. I mean, that is the issue that is driving extinctions, which is driving human impacts like cyclones or fires.
Torrential rains.
Yeah.
It's
It's driving.
scary.
Yeah. And we're talking about food shortages in places all over the world. And so it is going to be the issue, and it's going to be it's going to be an election year issue, because 2020 is an election year, and we want to make certain that people have information that they'll be able to pass on to the people who are candidates, and make certain that they hear that.
Be informed.
Yes, definitely. So anyway, anything you were interested about at the for Earth Day? I mean, we're kind of early in.
Really early, but
Yeah.
just getting those applications ready for vendors.
We have a website.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and it's earthdaystockton.com. And so
You're going to see last year's Earth Days advertising up right now. That'll change over the next few months.
Yeah.
But you can see the applications there. You can see what we did. Teachers, this is something to check out, because this is money that you can use in your classroom for climate change investigations with your students.
And we're talking between like $200 and $250 per classroom. And so if you have a group of 3 teachers in a school, and if you wanted to, like, say you were mentioning first, third, and fifth grade, have a team concept, then that would be like 3 classes at $200 a piece. That would be like $600. And so that you can do some things with that you don't normally get in your normal day-to-day stuff. So
you can think about doing water analysis at your school or your community.
Yeah, air pollution.
Somebody else is talking about air pollution.
Yeah. But it should have a focus on climate change, because that's where but in a lot of this, air pollution, water pollution,
connected.
everything is connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And so it's that is sort of what this Connections is about. I mean, we start with climate inaction is today's crisis, and what the focus is for this issue, and it was really quite gripping, was the Greta Thunberg speaking at the United Nations as a teenager who has a major stake in how this world develops in the next 50 years, say. And she was expressing her concern and her outrage at the older folks who have been ignoring, who are leaders, so-called leaders in the United Nations and in the world, and definitely in the United States. The outrage is that nothing substantial is being done in this crisis time. This is a crisis, and people are treating it as if it's something that can be solved in the next 20, 30, 40 years, just like we've been treating it like way we've been treating it in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look in the
constant circle of nothing.
If you look in Connections in the 1986 issue, there is something in there about greenhouse gases and about James Hansen from NASA predicting that exactly what is happening now is what is happening. And it is, this young woman is bringing out the bring out her rage.
She's speaking truth to power.
Yeah, and people are listening. And there's a lot of conservative pushback. People who want to keep things the same about who is this 16-year-old coming out and saying things out of school. When I was a 16-year-old, I wasn't worried about these sorts of things. Well.
No, we weren't.
No.
When I was 16, it was a different world.
Yeah,
and reality is here.
Yeah,
it's science has shown it.
Yeah, and we know, right. And the thing is that when we were 16 years old, this wasn't happening, and now it is happening. And the fact that we that people are listening to a 16-year-old teenager who is very articulate and is very strong in saying things that many scientists have been saying for years. It's great that it's being covered because she is a great spokesperson. It's I think conservative voices underestimate her at their risk because she is a force to behold. So. Yeah. So that's on the cover page. There's a nice picture of Save Our Planet that we have from the demonstration that I took part in up in Angels Camp.
100 protesters.
Yeah, it was
That's
great.
Impressive.
Yeah,
Wow.
in Angels Camp, it was great.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, so it was a corner of Highway 4 and 49 where we
know
normally,
that,
like
yeah.
a small group of us hold our signs, and this one was about climate change, and it was very, it was great. It was a good time, and I think there weren't as many young folks as we would hope, but I think as the word gets out and as people hear more and more about what is happening in this planet, we're going to have more turnout. So, and also on page 1 talks about Earth Days are coming. It talks about our event, the Earth Day Festival in Stockton. But then it also talks about a couple up in the foothills. The one that I'm involved with would be Sunday, April 8th, up in Calaveras County, the Earth Day celebration.
April 18th.
April 18th, I'm sorry. And that's on Sunday. That's the week before the Stockton one. And on the day before that, Amador County is going to have their second annual one, and their first annual was really great. And that will be on Saturday, April 17th. So there's going to be a lot of Earth Days coming up, a lot of celebrations that whole week about how we should be celebrating our Earth. And it's, no time like the present to get involved and to think about how we can affect the planet. On page 2 is my wonderful editorial, which is always fantastic. The headline is "It's never too late to join." So, if you feel like you sort of missed the boat, and boy, I sure do wish I'd taken part in some of this stuff. Well, there's still an opportunity.
Plenty of times.
There's plenty of time. And then Canadian Healthcare 20 Ways Better. Ralph Nader put out a piece that just has 22 different reasons why the Canadian healthcare system is better than ours. And if you have any argument with any of those, write
us a letter.
Write us. Because I don't think there is any argument for these things. Things that everybody is covered automatically at birth, everybody in, nobody out, a human right. Human system is designed to put people, not profits, first. Coverage is not tied to a job or dependent on your income. Healthcare coverage stays with you your entire life. You can freely choose your doctors and hospitals and keep them. Healthcare system is funded by income, sales, and corporate taxes that is much lower than what Americans pay in insurance premiums, directly or indirectly per employer, and so on. There are just so many different reasons why our ineffective, inefficient system has to be trashed. And that's another issue that we have to focus on. Before you got here, I was saying that the news is all this impeachment stuff,
Right.
and really that's all well and good. And and I would like to definitely take the Republicans' advice here and say stay focused on the issues and stay focused on legislation. But I think the impeachment is something that has to happen because the president we have now is
Impeachable.
Impeachable, yeah, corrupt and inept. But still, the thing is these issues we're talking about keep on rolling on, and they don't get better on their own. And so long as we keep on trying to push things through a Senate that isn't going to pass anything, or a president that's not going to sign anything, we have to stay engaged, and we have to keep on educating people
Right.
so that things can change. So when 2020 comes around, we can see some real change in some of these issues. So also on page 2, Standing for the Rights of Children. This is talking about promoting human rights for Palestinian children living under an Israeli Military Occupation Act. Prohibits the U.S. taxpayer funding for supporting the military detention and ill treatment of children of any country, including Israel. And so there's a large group, or not even a large group, but there's a group of people who will claim that what is happening to Palestinian children and it is somehow off limits, that you can't say anything about it, because if you do say something about it, somehow you're being anti-Semitic or you're being anti-Jewish. And this just focuses on the children and makes certain that people understand what is happening in Israel to Palestinian children who live in the occupied zones. And so Gloria writes very well on this, and so it's a letter that she wrote to Representative McNerney and encourages you to do the same. So when you pick up your paper, take a look. Then on page 3, Eric Parfrey has written actually a couple pieces. There's this piece, and then there's another piece on page 15, I believe, which is part 2 and 3 of his discussion on what happens when a local newspaper dies, and what happens when newspapers die just generally. And I think we all pretty much know, what will happen is that issues won't get covered, and especially local issues. And what you'll end up getting is you get concentration of opinion. And generally, the folks who are larger and stronger are going to come up with opinions that are maybe not in the best interest of everybody in the community. And so this happens in radio. This has happened in radio. It's happened in television.
It's definitely happened in television.
It definitely happened in television, and it's happening in newspapers. And the thing is that maybe people aren't noticing in newspapers so much because fewer people subscribe to newspapers,
Right.
because for one thing, fewer people read, and but the other sad part of it is that online advertising has really siphoned away much of the income that newspapers used to use to keep the presses running, and so now in the way that newspapers are able to stay alive is through subscription and through people, paying for the service, and with less advertising, fewer classified ads because of Craigslist or whatever, you end up having it to subscribe to a newspaper is much more expensive than it used to be.
Yeah, it is. I
But-
think the record now is $56 a month. It's much
Yeah,
more
so that's
expensive.
like a couple bucks a day, but that's delivered, of course.
It's delivered.
Yeah, but it's still it's really expensive to stay informed. But it's something that's vital, and I think what Bernie Sanders is suggesting, that there should be public subsidies to keep local newspapers alive, because if it weren't for the newspapers, we would not have any of the information that we have right now about what's going on with the current administration. We wouldn't have the stuff that I'm able to put into Connections, because the reporters that are out there wouldn't exist. And if we don't have a press, if we don't have a free press, we don't have a democratic country. We can't have democracy without people having good information to rely on. And so when we have an administration that cries fake news every time that there's an article that they don't like, it really undermines real fact gathering information that we all need to make decent decisions. Because if we don't have good information, we can't make good decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, so that's a good article that Eric writes. He's a great writer and a good local asset. And then on page 4, a pivot to digital shouldn't spell the end of local news, and that's talking about how there are some newspapers that are doing okay online, because a lot of people do get their news online. Unfortunately, they get it, like, say, from Facebook or Instagram rather than from properly sourced.
A lot of people
folks-
do go directly to, like, the New York Times
or the LA Times or
LA Times and read it online, which is
Yes.
important. That's,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, well, we haven't had it for a while, but I'm hoping that it got in this time. Yeah, it is. It's on page 6. It's finally alternative media sources, a listing of different alternative media sources that you can bookmark in your browser, and then you can take a look at these different things. And these are all sources on page 6 that I've used for connections and that are really good, reputable sources. Look at all of them and just get a good. This would be called alternative media sources.
That's really good.
Yeah, so it's a good group of sources. Then it doesn't have the mainstream sources like the New York Times or the Washington Post or Boston Herald. Or,
This will give you under the news.
Yes.
News
Yeah.
that
Yeah, things that will explain to you what you're reading. And so, but you should be really reading a lot of things because right now there is just a need to just have a rounded understanding of things. And so anyway, so the pivot to digital shouldn't spell the end to local news. We have our website, which we update occasionally. Hopefully, people pick up pick up connections in their local coffee shop. But anyway, so that's what this article is about. And then there's something from Jim Hightower that talks about the real deal on Medicare for All and explains how how costs for healthcare. Here he's saying that U.S. health expenditures jumped 16.5% between 2009 and 2016 for corporate insured patients, while costs dropped for 2% for Medicare patients, despite their having more complicated, chronic, and expensive problems. And I think that's what a lot of people don't really focus on, is that Medicare patients are the ones who are older. They're ones who have more needs, and the fact that that we can't somehow afford to have Medicare for all by going from, like, say, a 65 age eligibility down to 55, that should make the per patient cost even less for Medicare. And it should also alleviate some of the higher cost people from health insurances. So, moving in that direction, which a couple of Democratic presidential candidates are pushing for, should be fairly well received. But a lot of people, what I was seeing is a lot of people don't understand what Medicare for All means. They're saying, well,
it's socialist.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess that's all they understand about it. Yeah,
it's a commie plot.
It's a commie plot. Yeah, because that's what they've been told by the people who are selling you all these different drugs at dinner time.
It just is taking care of our population from birth to death.
Yeah, right.
It seems simple to me.
It seems very simple to me. Yeah, in fact, you ought to read the Nader piece and find out exactly how Canada
how
gets by.
Simple it is.
Yeah, and see how they can do it for less money.
Right.
And then on page 5, it discusses cutting Social Security behind closed doors. How the Senate is trying to figure out ways that they can change Social Security. Behind closed doors, but in closed session, so that they can somehow save it, because the long-term projection for Social Security is it's going to run out of money, or it's going to be insolvent in 15 years. And there's a whole lot of easy solutions to that, rather than cutting benefits or changing the eligibility age for people.
Yeah.
One thing a very simple thing to do would just be to remove the cap on the top income level that you can have the Social Security tax on. Right now, it's capped at about $125,000, $130,000. So just the first $125,000 or $130,000 of your income is taxed at 6.2%. And that's what your employer matches, 6.2%. This is for people who participate in Social Security.
Right.
But then everything above $160,000, which I've never met, but anybody who make every dollar above $160,000 that people make, that's not taxed at all for Social Security per year.
Oh.
So the thing is a millionaire is going to say you're making $130,000 and somebody makes $10 million. Each of those people is going to pay exactly the same amount into Social Security. And so if you wanted to actually make Social Security solvent, all you have to do is increase that cap.
Remove it.
Yeah,
Well,
remove
the
it,
cap.
remove it, or move it up to,
Yeah.
just like they did with Medicare.
why is there
Medicare
a
used to
cap?
have it. Yeah, Medicare used to have because that's what they could afford. They tried to get away with as little as they could afford,
Wow.
and so that's the way Medicare used to be. Medicare used to be the 1.45% of your income. And it was the same sort of cap. In fact, it was the same cap as the Social Security cap. But then when they started seeing that Medicare was going to become insolvent and they saw that Medicare is a fairly popular program, they said, oh, well, we can't have this happen. So how about we just get rid of the cap? And since it was only 1.45%, and then the employer, of course, matches 1.45%, so it's 2.9% of your income goes into this fund, then instantly Medicare becomes solvent. And so, and then if Medicare has any problem, well, what you could do is maybe change it from 1.45% to maybe a 1.5% or 1.75%. You know, the costs of Medicare do not go up anywhere near, as this article says, anywhere near the same percentage as the private insurance will allow. That's because Medicare has caps, and they are able to negotiate for drug prices, or no, they don't. But they can do that, and so Medicare is able to keep prices lower because they have the ability to do so, whereas insurance companies have no incentive at all to cap it because they're a for-profit.
Right, they're there to make money.
That's right. In fact, there is an article back here on page 16. Is it 16? 17. Can we trust CEOs' shock conversion to corporate benevolence? There was, this is by a Nobel Prize winning economist, Joseph Stiglitz. And on page 17, they talk about, he's talking about a statement that came out of, I think, the Business Roundtable, that they said that their bottom line isn't the bottom line. That corporations really have more. There's more to life than the stockholder, the stock price, and that there's more to life than profit. And what they want to do is they want to make certain that their companies are doing everything they can to be good corporate citizens. And so this article talks about how the CEOs of these companies have found the light and have seen the light, and now what they want to do is they want to be benevolent and not necessarily just follow the bottom line and increase profits as much as they can. So this is a good discussion by a Nobel Prize winning economist who really questions whether that statement of doing more for the world or for their workers or for the environment is a real claim, or if it's just something that they threw out there because right now a lot of people are seeing gross inequalities of income and of where people live and what sort of environment they live in. And that they're reacting to that and saying, "Oh yeah, I feel your pain," but it's
Really do it.
yeah. So you got to take a look at that article because it's a really interesting thing. On page 6, if we go on to page 6, and normally we don't get into partisan things, but we did want to make certain that that we did. This is our pages 6 and 7 are normal pages where we put in stuff about militarism and about war and peace. And page 6 talks about how Biden can't undo his support for the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And these, as a candidate for president, as the front runner at one point, Biden is considered to be a possible presidential, to be the president. And it's important for people to remember that Biden was a leader in getting us into the Iraq War, that he was not anybody who really tried to stop it, even no matter what he may say now. And so this is a good article for you to read, just so you understand where Biden was on Iraq.
What the history was.
What the history was.
Yeah.
The next two articles on page 7 is talking about Yemen, about how the United States supports the Saudi war in Yemen with by supplying all sorts of military hardware and expertise, training, that sort of thing. And so these two articles are grim pieces. The top one talks about how that the UN is reporting on the United States, France, and Britain having committed war crimes in Yemen. And Senator Bernie Sanders says we must use Congress's power of the purse to block every nickel of taxpayer money from going to assist the Saudi dictatorship as it bombs and starves civilians in Yemen. And so this is something that is one of the many wars that the United States is involved in across the world, and this is the one that is most blatantly murdering people. So anyway, so if you're interested in Yemen, and you can call your congressperson or your senator and let them know. Medea Benjamin has a nice piece on page 8 about should we feed hungry children or the war machine, and this is a continuation of sort of a solution to the Yemen question. Is that the feeding the poor would certainly win us more friends around the world than deploying another aircraft carrier. And so, who are we actually helping when we go to war against these poor folks who are getting bombed? It's and you read through this article and you'll see. It's definitely not the normal rate, the everyday person on the street who's getting bombed. There should be a little bit more empathy and understanding for people who are in such dire situations. And finally, contacting your representatives makes its appearance back in Connections.
Yeah, right, and it's up to date.
It's up to date.
Yeah.
So
Great.
that's nice. On page and that's on page 8. Page 9, we're talking about labor. Future of U.S. jobs looks bleak. Unions are the answer. And then on the bottom of the page, U.S. workers are 1/3 poorer than in 2003, and the top 1% is twice as rich. And so that's, and poor, what we're talking about is talking about wealth, because in 2008, most working people lost their homes, or a lot of working people lost their homes, lost a lot of equity in their homes, and that is just barely starting to come back if they were able to hold on to their homes. But the top 1% were able to buy up some of those homes when they were at a low price in 2008, and now they're sitting on properties that are worth a lot more than they were. And so, and on top of that, there was a huge tax cut that benefited the rich a couple years ago. So anyway, so that's the labor page. On page 10, we have a nice little chart here about how to a plastic reduction campaign. It's a nice little graphic on one reusable water bottle equals 167 plastic water bottles. The one reusable bag equals 375 plastic bags, and one metal straw equals 584 plastic straws. So those are things that small things that you can do that you should encourage all your friends to do, to switch out single-use plastic containers and to using things that are reusable.
And when you go to the grocery store, you don't need to put your produce in a plastic bag.
Right.
It can go in
Right.
the grocery cart, and
Yeah.
then it can go into the brown bag, and
Yeah.
it's just fine.
Yeah, and my daughter just made some cloth bags that she I think it was like, I don't know, it was an old sheet or whatever it was, but she made a few cloth bags with nice little drawstrings that is for produce. And so we're not using plastic bags for getting produce anymore. If you do need to pick up 3 or 4 or 5 zucchini or something, and you
Put
need
them
a
in
bag.
your grocery cart. No,
you-
put them in your grocery
I guess
cart.
you just
You
put
don't
'em in
need
your
a
grocery
bag.
cart. Okay.
You don't need a bag. You put it all in your grocery cart. You put it up on the thing. They weigh it or count it or whatever,
Yeah.
and you put it in your bag. And
Okay.
then when you get home,
Yeah.
wash it if you want to,
There
or
you go.
wash it before you use it.
Yeah.
But we really don't need plastic bags for everything.
That's right.
You think about how many plastic bags you put in a plastic bag that you put into the garbage that goes to the dump, and none of that's going to break down for eons.
Yeah.
And we do that every week.
Yes.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It can make you crazy thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems to be a topic these days in the last few months. I mean, I've seen probably 4 or 5 articles, and then not even when I'm reviewing for Connections, but 4 or 5 articles just on how much plastic waste there is, how much is in the oceans, how much animals are eating and killing and dying because of it. There are documentaries on TV. I mean, there's just all sorts of awareness.
Yeah, it's
And
good.
so
It's good. We
it
need
is
to
good.
be aware, and we
Yeah.
need to say no to the plastic
Yeah.
bags so that the stops will stop carrying them, and we stop making them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and one thing is in California, they did stop with the single-use bags, and even though the doom and gloom folks were saying, well, the grocery stores saying, oh, we can't have people reusing bags. I mean, that would be unclean or whatever. But here we are. We're
There's
reusing our
plastic-
bags.
There are plastic bags everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the single use that you take they checked out, they used to have these real thin.
Oh,
little
they're thin? Oh,
the
okay.
little flimsy bags.
Now we have thicker ones that
Thicker
take
one.
even longer.
Well, they cost you 10 cents.
Yeah.
So yeah, or paper bags.
Our paper bags.
But the thing is, what it does is at least gets you aware that that's happening, and so that you know that when you're asking for a plastic bag and you're being charged 10 cents, is, oh gee, why am I being charged 10 cents? Oh well, maybe that's
I don't think it's enough.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So
Plastic.
And so here, then I have my little fundraising letter. Dear Connections readers, education, knowing and caring is the first step to action. Without a reason, no action will take place. That's why we at the Peace and Justice Network, and I personally, have chosen to keep this paper alive and strong. We see media move to being exclusively corporate mouthpieces or to just stop publishing altogether. Social media is unmoored from reality in so many ways, and yet many rely on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter for their worldview. More information is available, yet we are drowning in distraction. We ask you from time to time to support this paper, and an all-important group does so generously and often. We owe them a great debt of gratitude. If you haven't given recently and believe, as we do, that without quality information there can be no quality change, please help us out financially. The paper costs about $12,000 a year. The Peace and Justice Center about the same. Whatever you contribute will be a mighty investment in our collective future. We are your neighbors who are deeply concerned about our planet's future. Join us. Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very good. So send in that money.
Please, yeah, I know it's difficult because so many people are asking for funds these days. But we are your local connection, and we do want to keep give people an outlet to be able to actually do things in our San Joaquin County community. On page 11 is talking about San Joaquin County high schools reaching out to educate and register new young voters. Because as you may or may not know, kids who are when they turn 16, they can pre-register to vote for the time when they're able to vote when they're 18. And so what this shows is where the League of Women Voters is going out and along with the Registrar of Voters and the San Joaquin County Office of Education
And the high school students.
They're getting high school students to high school students are actually registering each other.
They're registering each other. They're working with the high school students who are being activists on their campus and getting their peers registered because it's their future. It's really more and more obvious every day.
And there's something really encouraging about how young folks are really becoming aware of what is happening on this planet, and are willing to take action to keep the planet alive. It'd be one thing if they said, "Oh, we just go back to sleep and forget it," but they're not, and so. It's encouraging. Page 11. On page 12 is our agricultural page, and the top is our piece from Shane, who says that he talks about the fun in farming and how it's about 15% of the time is fun and 85% of the time is work. So it's not like it's all fun, but it's satisfying, and that's a nice article. And then also. On the bottom of page 12, talking about fracked gas heats the planet, but supporters say it's the solution. So this is another article about about how disinformation happens about how fracked gas is supposed to be our salvation, because of course it's not. At least it's not coal. So it's natural gas. So it's our environmentally friendly fossil fuel, right? No,
Not so much.
Not so much. I mean, the thing is it is better than coal in terms of particulates, but it's just as damaging as in terms of greenhouse gases. And in the process of fracking it, a lot of methane escapes from the well, which is methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas. And in fact, the Trump administration in the past month or so has moved to change the rules that allows methane gas to escape from fracked wells at a much more freely, in a less regulated way, because we have to frack gas because we need the fossil fuels. So that's an interesting article on page 12. Page 13 is just sort of a primer on the destruction of the Amazon. It's a nice basic fact piece on why the Amazon is important, because right now the Amazon is on fire, and so and with the new government that they've installed, they're burning it even faster than they ever have. So because they want it's a pro business move.
Right.
To make certain that they can farm soybeans, make more money. Because right now the United States is no longer shipping soybeans to China, so Brazil has to step up. And so what they're going to do is they're going to burn down their forest so they can sell more soybeans.
Wow.
On the bottom, I talked about this earlier about the Trump administration going after California's air pollution controls. That may not last the administration, because W. Bush tried to do the same thing, but it got tied up in courts, and once Obama got elected, it was dropped. So it may end up having the same fate, but it does sort of show where the current administration is. On page 14 is the discussion of Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal plan, and why, which is an amazing plan. It is just revolutionary, really. But it really takes the climate change issue very seriously, and is about the most ambitious Green New Deal plan there is out there. And so you might want to read through this article. There's the folks who want to keep things the same are going to attack it, but you got to check it out, because it's really amazing. It's an amazing plan. On page 15, Fred Mescal has collected some more vignettes from homeless folks and what they're going through, and there's a few stories there. And then on bottom of page 15. There was a bit of a positive news, is that the secret terrorism watch list that the United States established years ago, even before the Trump administration, is unconstitutional in that it pretty much predetermines that there's a certain group of people who are watchable, who are people who we should be watching. And they have no recourse. There's no reason for them to be on that list. They could just be because they have the same type of name as somebody else, or they happen to have something that looks like it's an Islamic surname or something like that. Right. And so this is a good article from The Intercept that discusses how a court overturned that the use of that list. On page 16, we're talking about Eric is finishing up on how the local newspaper in Stockton became a ghost paper. You got to take a look at that. That's kind of a scary thing, but it's essentially a paper that has a framework, but really is doesn't have as much information as it used to. Because we all know, folks. A lot of us know people who used to work at the Record, who are no longer working at the Record, and and the spaces have been filled. I mean, I don't know if you picked up the Stockton Record lately.
I haven't.
But it is very thin.
It's-
It is.
oh, yeah, I've seen it. It's
It
very
is
thin.
just like it used to be on Mondays there was like an 8-page front section, maybe a 6-page second section, and a 4-page sports section,
sports,
and
yeah.
it's like that every day now.
Yeah.
And the local voices are few and far between. The local voices that we all love to hear are gone. And so you got to take a look at this and maybe subscribe to the local paper, and try to keep what we have alive.
Yeah.
And then on page 16, the corporate media war on Bernie continues, and that's just not so much just talking about Bernie, but it's just talking about the whole his whole message of being anti-corporate and actually pointing a finger at people like Amazon's Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post. How it's okay. So now it's okay for these corporate newspapers start piling on Bernie, or just to not report on how well he's doing, because they definitely don't want him to become president. And it's just interesting to see how much power how much power the corporate media has, and on something. I mean, I'm sure if you haven't read this about this Green New Deal on page 14, how Bernie Sanders, his Green New Deal is just an amazing stab at dealing with climate change. It's largely because of corporate media outlets that are not adequately covering it, because something like that Green New Deal is going to really upset an apple cart. It's going to change economic relations in a major way.
This will give you information, and I don't want to use ammunition, but it'll give you ways to have that conversation with people who don't get it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, when you take a look at the alternative media sources on page 6, subscribe to those, because they're free subscriptions. You'll get that stuff you'll get these articles in your email address on a regular basis. That's on page 6, the alternative media sources. And you don't have to read all the articles, because it's just too many. But there are. It will just give you an idea as to the sort of issues that are not covered in your basic corporate media.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, on page 17, the Stiglitz piece on how the CEOs are saying that they're not worried about profits anymore, that they really want to help the community and be good citizens. On page 18. Talks about a fundraising thing about, do you know about an IRA charitable rollover? If you're interested in passing on if you have to tap into your IRA and you really don't want or need the money, you can pass it. You can roll it over to a charitable nonprofit. It could be Peace and Justice Network. It could be any other nonprofit, but that's one way for you to be able to support an organization without necessarily feeling it if you don't need to. There's a good book review here on 100 Ways to Build a Fossil-Free Future,
Nice.
Raise Empowered Kids and Still Get a Good Night's Sleep. And it's a nice book review. There's some information about Delta Sierra Club meetings that are happening on the fourth Monday.
You
which they
should
always
check
do.
out the Delta Sierra Club. They did a great community gathering and discussion on coal trains that pass through Stockton on the way to the port, bringing coal from the upper Midwest, Northwest to the Stockton port, and then out to Richmond to Japan. Do we really want coal trains coming through Stockton
Yeah.
with coal dust
Yeah.
and the fact that do we want coal
Right.
being used anywhere in the world?
Right. Yeah, to support that, so there's this false choice that coal companies or that fossil fuel companies set up there, saying, well, you're going to lose all these jobs if you stop using coal.
That was part of the discussion,
Yes, of
is
course.
how can we make a changeover?
Right.
We need to think about that. People are working in these jobs,
Right.
and we can't just say, that's it, sorry, bye.
Yeah,
We need to change.
So the thing is that nobody thought about what would happen to the poor streetcar guys working in L.A. when they started building all these highways and things for cars to take the place of those streetcars. Because there were subsidies that were coming out that were paying for roads and paying for bridges and paying for this new car economy. And so now when we're taking a look at saying, well, maybe we ought to step back from the car economy, or we ought to take a look at electrical fueled vehicles, but then also take a look at, well, what do we do with the batteries, or what do we do with all these different byproducts? It has to be well thought out, and it can't just be by saying, well, we sure do hope a Tesla is going to come up and find a more profitable way to make more money than GM. There has to be some thought as to how we are going to get from here to there, right. And it should be a community decision and not just a corporate decision on profit and the bottom line. Because if it goes profit and bottom line, what exists now is what's always going to win.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then on page 20, addressing those who have been fooled all of the time, and this is talking about our dear President Donald Trump, and talking about how, and I think this is an informative piece when when we're seeing the reaction of President Trump to all this impeachment process. And so just taking a look at this and understanding where this guy's coming from, and understanding what motivates him, and how, what sort of reaction we can expect. It's a very interesting psychological observation of this guy. Great. So anyway, so it should be informative in the next couple months, because we're going to be seeing a lot of things in the next couple months, and even in the next year. But it's still important for us to stay focused on important issues that are going on all the time. And climate change is the major thing, because of it, we are seeing extinctions. And extinctions are things that you cannot. You can't replace an animal that has gone extinct. Right. You can make more profit on another day, but you cannot. When a rhino goes extinct, it's gone. Or when the coral reefs are gone, they're gone. And so we have to stay focused on this. Our next Earth Day meeting is going to be, if you're interested in helping to coordinate with Earth Day, it'll be November 4th at the Peace and Justice Center. And we'd like to come on out and help us make this event happen. We have a nice meeting of about 8 people this evening, and that's our core. And so we'll keep on building on that core and make this our best Earth Day ever. It'll be our 32nd annual out at Victory Park. Great. On April 26th.
And before that, November 6th and 7th December 6th and 7th is the Peaceful Holiday Fair at Central United Methodist Church on Pacific Avenue in Stockton. And once again, it's our 33rd.
Yeah.
And it's a great community event. Lots of beautiful gifts, handmade. Just a great place to get together with friends and meet new people and get some holiday shopping done.
Yeah. And that's Friday evening. Friday evening and Saturday, pretty much the days. Friday evening from 4 to 8:30, and December 7th, Saturday from 10 to 3:30. So so that's December 6th and 7th. Look forward to seeing you, 3700 Pacific Avenue. Great. So anyway, thanks so much, Christie, for taking the time coming by. Yeah. And this is Bruce Giudici, Peace and Justice Connections. Have a great week.